ahead and start. Oh, 5 o'clock. Good. It's 5 o'clock, so let me call this special Board of Finance meeting. Today is Thursday, June 8th, 2023. We are in the City Hall auditorium and via Zoom. Participating in person, I have Board Member Deb Ionesito. I have Board Member Lorene Pesky, Board Member Mark Bushka, Board Member Christopher Bayes, and Board Member Jim Wright. I don't see Christopher Anderson on yet, but I do believe that he will be joining us. So before we get into the agenda, could we please stand and pledge the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, just as a reminder, the purpose of this evening's meeting, I don't need a motion. I'm just going to move into the discussion of budgets. Does not need a motion. As a reminder, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to adopt a budget and set the mill rate for real estate, personal property, and motor vehicles. And at this stage of the budget process, it is this board, the Board of Finance, that reviews all of the proposals that have been presented and weighs them against what they feel the taxpayers can afford. This board has received and reviewed both the Board of Education and the city budget spending requests, met in joint meetings with the respective boards, both the Board of Ed and the City Council. And there were 2 public hearings, one on the Board of Education budget and one on the city budget requests. At both joint meetings, there were requests for additional information that has been provided to the Board of Finance as it came in or as it was available for its further consideration in adopting the fiscal year 2024 budget. As I would make my way through the PowerPoint presentation, the requested information will either, and supporting documents will be highlighted, but will not be a part of the PowerPoint presentation. So if we could jump into the PowerPoint document, please. So I'm going to start this evening's meeting at the end. I'm going to start at the end and I'm going to end at the end. And the reason I'm going to do this is I felt that it was important for the board to know where I'm going and my rationale for going there. So on this page, you will see that my goal was to take into consideration first, factor in all of the available funding sources available to adopt this budget. So it's not just the revenue, it's not just the traditional revenue, but it's revenue, it's the Alliance District funding, it's the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 10-262, 2% appropriation that the Board of Education has taken advantage of the last 2 years. And during the joint meeting with the Board of Education, the Board of Finance heard that they intend to do so again this year. We also wanted to factor in the proceeds from the sale of East School. At the time we had a joint meeting regarding the sale of the East School, this board did suggest and recommend that those sale proceeds be considered to offset some of the capital expenses that the Board of Education would be incurring. We also wanted to, this board also requested year-end surpluses. And we also factored in the impact of school construction debt service and how that school construction debt service impacts the city budget. Even though it's debt service for construction of the school, it is budgeted on the city side. You will see when I talk about that we actually broke out of debt service, that portion that is strictly related to school construction versus the portion of the entire debt service, which was in the City Council's department. budget review. At this point, I think that the important thing for us to remember is, and I heard during those joint meetings, particularly the last joint meeting, a request for a breakdown of the proportional share of the total budget. You know, what portion of the budget does the Board of Education have, and what portion of the budget is reflected on the city side? So in order to give you those numbers, I really kind of needed to be at the end of my recommendation based on the information. And where we are right now is the Board of Education share, should the Board of Finance accept the recommendation based on this breakdown, the Board of Education share would be 54%, and the city share is 46%. So knowing that we're 54, 46, we're roughly 50-50, I said, let's look at this with an equitable distribution. So twofold, looking at all of the available sources and impact on those budgets and trying to be as equitable as we could. So on this page, you will see that my proposals are to increase the Board of Education's current budget, fiscal year 2023 budget by $1,341,575. In addition to that increase, we would be looking at the $478,666. That is the 10-262K appropriation, 2% of the ECS. The surplus that the Board of Education shows, and you'll see all of this on the following sheets. They are projecting somewhere around $200,000 as of their last budget meeting. Documents which were online. The increase in the Alliance District funding of $1,259,895 that was adopted by the state in its budget adoption the night before last, resulting in a net impact, resulting in additional funding for the school at $3,780,136. On the city side, I took the city's budget as presented with a $5,202,755 increase. Adjusted for that portion of the debt service, which is related to school construction. So I'm reducing that just to show what is actually being spent on city projects and city operations. So we reduced it by the $1,119,608, resulting in a net impact of $4,083,147. You can see that this is roughly $300,000 within $300,000 of each other. I don't mind telling you that as Robin and I were working our way through all of the budget requests and looking at, you know, all of these various funding streams, we have been consistently and repeatedly utilizing a number that was presented to the Board of Finance by the superintendent, reflecting a budget, operating budget request of $81,865,010. And then yesterday, as we were plugging all these numbers into our budget calculation, the big spreadsheet that the Board of Finance reviews, we realized that the budget detail really is only asking for $81,561,259, roughly $300,000, which is why this first sheet that we were reviewing has that $300,000 difference. For tonight's purposes, we are utilizing the budget documents that were presented, and I did in fact go into the Board of Education's meeting minutes just to see what the board voted on for a budget, and they did in fact vote on the $81,561,259. So that's the end. That's at the end. That's where we're going to put it on the table for the Board of Finance to consider. So as usual, where I want to start is I want to start with the historical information, fiscal year 22-23. The current mill rate is 47.14 mil on real estate and personal property, and 32.46 mil on motor vehicles. The budget adoption, as you can see, the city was at 61,815,350. The Board of Education 78,131,123. And then these are all reflected, last year's, or the current year, I should say, budget revenues and what we used, what this board used by way of non-recurring or one-time revenues. Fund balance at 2.1 million, internal service at 2 million, and the first round of bond ban premiums of 483. Next slide, please. So obviously, we're always waiting for the grand list information. This year, you saw a 1.74 blended grand list increase. Real estate went up 0.8%, personal property up 2.16, and motor vehicle up 6.54. Keep in mind, all of the motor vehicle grand list is capped, or at least the revenue that we can earn on that growth. So that is reflected later on in the discussion. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, when we talk about section 10-262K, this is a statute that allows boards of education that are underperforming or that have met certain deficiencies in their metrics that can access additional ECS, that's the education cost share funding, directly. So instead of the full appropriation for ECS funding coming to the city for general fund purposes, they make an application to the State Department of Education. That application includes a proposed budget, and the State Department makes a determination as to whether or not it would approve the appropriation. For the last 2 years, it has. I have no reason to believe that it will not do so again this year. And the net result of that year over year is $478,666. And the reason that does not change is reflected on the next screen. Slide 7. Thank you. So what happens with ECS, as we all know, if we were not an alliance district, year over year, the state increases ECS funding to municipalities for purposes of offsetting the impact of educational expenses on your taxpayers. Since 2018, we've been now 7 years. This will be the 7th year that we have been designated as an alliance district. What happens when you are designated an alliance district is the city's share, I shouldn't say the city share, excuse me, the general fund share of ECS is frozen at the 2013 funding level, and all increases in ECS are deferred and paid directly to the Board of Education. So in 2018, that was $549,522. In fiscal year 2024, that is going to be $6,261,514. You also see in this spreadsheet where the 2013 appropriation for general fund purposes has been reduced further by the $478,666. That's the 10-262K appropriation. So that gives you an idea of, why when we look at our revenues for setting the mill rate purposes, are we consistently showing only $23,454,677? The balance of those funds are sent to the Board of Education directly. And they do account to the state of Connecticut for those funding or spending. I need to remind the Board of Education, not the Board of Education, the Board of Finance again, that as an Alliance district, when those ECS funds are sent to the Board of Education, that is not a grant. Those are education cost share funds. They will not disappear after the Board of Education is exited from an Alliance district status. Once the schools are graduated out of the Alliance district designation, all of those ECS funds are restored to general fund, and all of the expenses that are budgeted in the Alliance district budget also become a part of the operating expenses. So dollar for dollar, revenues are restored, and all of those expenses then roll into the operating budget. So next screen, please. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, year over year, 2018 through fiscal year 2024. And this fiscal year 2024, you see an asterisk because these numbers are based on what the Board of Education has requested for a budget. I think for purposes of, the reality, let's look at fiscal year 2023. The Board of Education was, the appropriation was $78,131,123. They also received $5,010,275 by way of Alliance District, the ECS portion, referred to as Alliance District. They received $478,666. So their operating budget was then $83,620,064. So if they were exited from the Alliance District designation this year, that would be the beginning point. That would in fact be the MBR, the 83,620,064. 2024, you see there's that increase of 1.2, I think it's 1.259859, resulting in $6,270,170 in Alliance District funding, the 478.66. If their entire request had been funded, this would result in a operating budget of $90,899,148. Next slide, please. So let's talk about revenue. This is a summary of the revenue, but in the documents that were handed out, there is a revenue sheet with a breakdown by department or by function. For general or summary discussions, general government revenues are $13,239,066. The public safety revenues are projected to be $732,500. I should share when we talk about these revenues, the $13,239,066 is a $3,264,958 increase over last year, or I should say the current year. The vast majority of that is investment interest, with the U.S. Treasury increasing interest rates. Our treasurer, Dan Farley, was doing yeoman's work, tracking where the best interest rates were and how he can move monies around to capitalize on 0.5% more here or there. So where we were a year ago before the U.S. Treasury started moving the interest rates around, we were relying on $100,000 worth of interest. Throughout the year, we saw that change, and we are projecting something more in line with the $1,750,000 over the next 12 months. There is also in this budget the motor vehicle transition grant. You will recall last year we had a 25% grant list growth in the motor vehicles, and the motor vehicle mill rate cap was implemented, but they base the transition grant or reimbursement on the prior year's grand list. So we lost the 25% growth last year, and you saw a roughly $900,000 loss in revenue. This year, they again are relying on the prior year's grand list, and this is where that 25% increase has come into play. So that is a $1,518,327 increase in revenue. The other revenues, you can see a $300,000 reduction in our building fees. This 303 reduction is not a reflection on less or fewer permit fees. It's reflective of the fact that the school construction permit fee that was not waived, there was over $1 million of permit fees waived, but $365,000 was agreed by the Board of Finance and City Council to be paid. So that 303 is a reduction, knowing we won't be getting that revenue again this year. So public safety, we're looking at a reduction of 185,000. We're at 732.5. The reduction in this is reflected in workers' comp and insurance payroll reductions of $100,000 and $30,000 reduction in the fire department's workers' comp and insurance payroll. We're looking at level funding or projecting level funding of public works revenue at $150,234. We're looking at a level funding of recreation revenues, $12,000. And in the education revenues last year, we're looking at a $539,676 reduction over last year's appropriation, and that's largely the result of the excess cost reimbursement. When this board asked for the 2-year look back, 3-year look back on Board of Education's expenditures, you saw that there were significant savings in special education, particularly the tuition. When those funds are not being expended, the excess cost reimbursement is also reduced. So we did receive in a review of the year-end results, you would have seen that there was a loss. We over projected what we would receive by way of revenues based on the projected expenses. But this year we're correcting that by appropriating something more in line with what we expect to get. So there's a reduction of $539,676 in that line item. In the appropriation from fund balance, you will see a $200,000 reduction. As you know, and as this board directed, when we started utilizing the fund balance to offset the impact of the spending plans on the taxpayers, the plan was to wean ourselves off of that one-time revenue. We went from a $3.6 million use 4 years ago. We are now down to, I am proposing that we reduce that this year to $1.9 million. So year over year, we reduced it several $100,000. This year, I'm only looking to reduce it by $200,000. So including the appropriation from fund balance, you're looking at $43,108,532. When I take that $1.9 million out, well, I'll leave that there for now. We'll go into the next sheets to talk further about that. So those are the those are the revenue changes on everything outside of the tax revenues. The next slide, please. Year-end projections. There is, Robin did provide the Board of Finance a document showing where we think we're going to end. This Board of Education's surplus in the documents that have been provided at your seats. You'll find the 2-year trend analysis that the Board of Finance requested almost 2 months ago. And you'll also find the most recent Board of Education budget projections dated 3/31/2023 and 4/30/2023. I'm using their budget projections dated 4/30/2023 with a roughly $200,000 surplus projection. The $800,000 projection on the city side, this is a combination of those expense surpluses, the vast majority of which are in the police department, where we have 10 vacancies in the police department. But it also includes a revenue line item that the state did provide after our budgets were adopted last year. So the blended revenue and expenses show that we may end up close to $800,000 in surplus this year. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about those non-recurring revenue sources, which I, after a review with Robin, feel could be in play again this year. The Internal Service Fund. This is, as you know, the self-insured insurance fund, always looking at those reserves. How comfortable are we where the balance is? The vast majority of those funds in that in the Internal Service Fund are taxpayers' funds. Those are the tax funds that are set aside to cover those health costs for both the Board of Education and city employees. So when we find ourselves well reserved and in a position where those funds can be pushed back to the taxpayers or put back to work for the taxpayers, we like to do that. So we are again recommending $2 million out of the Internal Service Fund. Our fund balance, as I said earlier, we are trying to wean ourselves off of those one-time revenue sources. I think it's particularly important that we continue to focus on that because we are now also relying on additional one-time revenue sources, which is the next line item, the bond and ban premium and interest transfer. This is a one-time revenue. We're looking at $1,593,000. That is a combination of the premiums that were paid by the corporations purchasing our bonds, and it includes some of the interest that has been earned on those premiums or bond funds. Yes, thank you. I know. So
is that all of it?
that is not all of it.
Not all.
And Robin, if you want to.
The premium that we earned, we can only use up to the amount that we're expensing in interest for that particular year.
So where I think.
One more question. What does the 1.9 from the fund balance leave in the fund balance? I know it's 9.5.
I don't have an exact number at
Okay.
this time,
I guess
not until the budget is, the audit is finalized.
So as you heard Robin say, we can only use up to the current years or the projected years interest payment. We get into an arbitrage if we're not being very careful how we use those interest earned against interest payments. But the benefit of not being able to utilize all of it or being planful for the use of the interest that gets earned on these bond funds is next year, this debt service will be even higher than it is this year. And the year after, it will be even higher then. So being able to hold back some of those bond premiums and being planful with the interest that gets earned, we will next year, when we do this budget adoption, we will have additional one-time revenues in the form of bond ban premiums and interest. But for now, this is the best we could do based on what the interest charges are going to be. So total one-time revenues this year are 5,493,000. 5,493,000. Next slide, please. So this is where we go into the spending plans. You've got the revenue, you've got the one-time income sources. Now we can go in and we could talk about the budget requests. The Board of Education's budget request, as you will recall, came in at 84,400,000 and change. As I said a little bit earlier, when we started to plug in all of the numbers, we picked up a $300,000 discrepancy. The Board of Education's request was actually for operating 81,561,259. And their capital request, that's both technology and facilities, is $2,589,053. So their total request is 84,153,12. At that joint meeting, I know that the Board of Finance did request a projection of what it would look like if there had been any reductions. That brought it to a 2% increase. But as you know, the superintendent corresponded with my office on May 10th and said that the board had been looking at it and said that they could not come up with any cuts at that time. Next slide, please. Fiscal year 23-24 city department requests. This is at level 2. The reason I'm starting with the city department, City of Torrington level 2, is level 1 was all of the department heads requests when the budget was delivered to the Board of Finance and City Council on February 15th. And on February 15th, we did not have the debt service numbers yet. So at level 2 is when the debt service numbers were plugged in. And at level 2, the city's request was $68,121,588. And the joint meeting with the City Council on June 2nd, the request to me was to bring forward reductions. I sent the charge back to the department heads. On June 2nd, the City Council accepted those budget reductions, primarily Public Works, and the Police Department came in with a proposal to fund 5 of the 10 vacant positions at the half year. So as it currently stands, the city's budget expense request is $67,018,105, which is a $5,202,755 increase over fiscal year 2022. Next slide. Thank you. So let's talk about the mill rate impact based on those expense requests, utilizing available revenues and non-recurring revenues at the existing mill rate. That existing mill rate, again, for your actually, no, I don't. I just have it at the motor vehicle existing mill rate 32.46. So total budget requests combined is 151,168,417. The state grants and department revenues are 41,208,532. Funds needed to cover those expenses after those state and local grants is 109,959,885. Because the motor vehicle taxes are capped, we know that the most we can get for revenues on our motor vehicle are $10,217,041, leaving a balance of $99,742,844. When I use those one-time revenues, should the Board of Finance agree that those are appropriate, we will be short $94,249,844, which would mean a tax increase or a mill rate increase of 3.3138, which, based on the joint meeting with the City Council and the Board of Finance, I know there was absolutely no appetite to go down that road. So sharpening our pencil. The things that I took into consideration in formulating this recommendation was first to segregate the proportional share of the debt service for school construction to show what the actual cost of city projects and operational expenses are. That's where that in the first slide, you will recall, I used the 1,119,608. On the education side, I took into consideration the 478.66. That is the CGS 10-262K. Took into consideration the increase of the Alliance District funding, 1,259,895. Took into consideration the 3-year trend the Board of Education has been showing on their other purchase services. This is year over year, at least in the first 2 years, in excess of 1.6 million. And then in the more current year, I think it's 1,080,000 surpluses. I know that those surpluses, the Board of Education does a great job of moving those funds so that they can maximize the impact of those funds on education. However, they were also utilizing those funds for capital purchases, such as computers and smart boards. I think there was a plow truck that was purchased. And this is where we have to be very careful, because when you are purchasing capital assets out of your operating budget, it does skew the MBR, the minimum budget requirement for the Board of Education. So took that into consideration. I heard the Board of Finance ask for that information. I did take that into consideration. I did also, as this board had directed me, I did take into consideration the $500,000 from the sale proceeds of the school. And based on past practice and discussion, took into consideration where the Board of Education was anticipating its surplus would be for fiscal year 2023. Other questions on any of that? All right. So utilizing all of that information, and again, this is, going back to that first slide, which is actually the last slide. I am making the recommendation that in the Board of Education's request, that their request be reduced by $2,838,561. This is utilizing the 478.66, utilizing Alliance funding 1.259895, which then shows an actual reduction with no other revenue offset of 1.1 million. You will see that that was roughly what the city came up with when we presented our budget cuts that were approved by the City Council. Board of Education capital request was, I'm recommending a reduction of $1,839,053. This again is taking into consideration a $200,000 projected $200,000 surplus and the $500,000 eSchool sale proceeds, which would offset or mitigate the loss of, I shouldn't say loss, the lack of funding in that proposal. Next slide, please. One slide back. Oops. Tricky one, the one that doesn't want to be stopped. All right. So what is this? How does this shake out for us, and where does this have us landing? This then results in a 0.8194 mil increase to the current mill rate. That means our mill rate would be 47.9636. That means the city budget would be adopted at $67,018,105. The Board of Education's operating appropriation would be $78,722,698. Board of Education capital appropriation of $750,000. And again, this all is contingent on this board's approval and recommendation for the use of those non-recurring or one-time revenues. Total budget adoption would be $146,490,803. Next slide. And again, just to close the loop here, the trying to show the equitable funding of the two, I'm going to call them two departments. It's one budget or one organization. I'm calling this the two departments. The equitable funding, again, is an increase of general fund funding for the Board of Education at $1,341,575. But when you factor in those other funds and any surplus that the board may end up with, they are at $3,781,36. And on the city side, again, focusing on those funds that are available to cover city expenses. Those are city projects and operating budgets, police department, fire department, public works. We would be at $4,083,147. Questions on the numbers?
Mayor, if I may.
Oh,
Chris.
for the record should reflect that Christopher Anderson has joined the meeting. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Just to clarify, from what I saw in the PowerPoint, what I heard you just say, there was a vehicle included in the Board of Education's operating budget. Is that correct?
In fiscal year 22, yes.
Do we have any understanding for why that was paid out of operating and not transferred into capital first?
No, no. So I would like to suggest to answer that question is the process whereby the Board of Education, and this is statutorily driven, whereby this Board of Education has surpluses, would be that the Board of Education would present to the Board of Finance where they are with their surpluses and seek authorization to move those surpluses into a capital account with a proposed spending plan, and appropriately the purchase of computers and vehicles or any other fixed asset would come out of that capital. So I would propose that to amend that and make sure that it doesn't happen anymore, that there be a policy that is adopted by the Board of Finance, where it is clear as to what that process is. And the policy really would just memorialize what is actually already written in statutes. I will tell you a lot of this came to light for us through this current audit process, where the auditors were picking up on a number of purchases and transfers of funds that haven't gone through the proper process.
Thank you. And yeah, I guess my understanding was that was already the policy. So if something needs to be clarified, I do think that would be helpful.
Absolutely, no. And I think when this audit report is finalized, I think it will require a joint meeting with the Board of Education and the Board of Finance and the auditor, so that we could get all of this on the table, and moving forward, just make sure that, the paper trail process is clearly understood on both sides. Other questions on the numbers?
Robin, I have a clarification on the projected surplus, 800,000. Is that, we will create an operating surplus of 800,000? Our revenues are going to be more than our expenses, or we projected 1.9 out of fund balance, and we only have to take 1.1 out of fund balance?
Correct. We had about $300,000 surplus on the expense side and a $500,000 surplus on the revenue side.
Okay.
We had interest income along with the additional $738,000 that we received from the state after the budget was approved.
Okay.
And then we saw a loss in the excess cost,
Okay. So you're talking relative to where projected, our budget projections.
correct?
Okay. So we projected, was it 2.1 million out of fund balance?
Yes,
Yes,
And we're only going to need 1.3 million out of fund balance.
yes.
Okay.
Which is why I'm comfortable with a proposal of using 1.9 again this year.
Yes. I mean, technically, we wasn't using the difference between the by 800,000.
Yeah.
And I have I got a question for the Board of Ed. The Alliance funds, your spending of the Alliance funds are not included in your budget request of 84 million. Is that correct? Okay, but they're not in your budget request. Okay.
And I know that that was one of the other questions that was asked in the joint meeting for the Alliance District budget. The superintendent did communicate to us that the 2024 Alliance District budget had not yet been formulated because there was no, I don't want to use the word confidence. There was no knowledge as to what that increase would be, so they hadn't gone through that exercise. But again, in the documents that are paper clipped together that were handed out to you, I do have the 2023 Alliance District budget showing how the $5,619 is being spent. Oh, Ms. Pesky.
Mayor, can you explain perhaps in a little more detail the rationale for segregating the proportional share of the debt service for school construction? It's not something that I'm
Sure, no,
familiar with and that we've ever done
no.
before.
We haven't. The reason that I was looking at that is I was trying to get to that number of what the city departments are actually seeking by way of operating expenses, capital improvements, insurance, and recognizing that all debt service is the responsibility of the city. But that portion of the debt service being directly related to the school construction, which we know that the voting public overwhelmingly approved. I just wanted this board to recognize that of the debt service which the city is responsible for, 1.1 million, 1.119 is actually related to the school construction and beyond the city department's controls.
Maureen, that was also something that I had requested in a previous meeting. I appreciate seeing it separately. Thank you.
I know he was cutting. I think he said he appreciated that it was separated out so that he could understand what the impact of school construction was.
You requested it.
Oh, it was, I knew somebody requested it. I'm sorry. But to your point, Ms. Pesky, it is absolutely an improvement to city assets, and it is budgeted in the city side. But I did want to answer the question that was asked in the joint meetings. Other questions on the presentation?
I just gonna say that I think if you look at the budget compared to the prior year budget, the Board of Ed's only getting 1.3 million increase and the city's getting 5.2 million increase.
Yes.
I'm not comfortable with that, given the percentage of budget, total budget. Board of Ed budget is 56%. Yet they're getting only a very smaller percentage of the increase. And I understand your rationale for doing it, but I don't feel that it's very equitable, to be honest.
And keep in mind that that 54%, 46% is based on a $1.3 million increase to the Board of Education. Any change in that allocation changes the percentage proportional share.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just concerned that we're asking the Board of Ed to cut 2.8 million out of their operating budget.
Mhm.
And I mean, another thing is the capital last year. I think there was no capital budget last year and we're only giving them 750. And they requested 2.5 million. So,
750 plus the 500 from the
yeah,
e-school
okay.
and the surplus that they have from the current year. So it would be roughly 1.2
Capital,
million.
yeah, capital's not too far off. Okay.
Right. Other questions on the numbers? Okay, then, if there are no questions on just the budget discussion, I need to move into the budget adoption, which is item number 2 on our agenda. This would be a roll call vote. I am looking for a motion to adopt the 23-24 Board of Education operating budget based on the current recommendation at $78,722,698. Is that the right amount? Thank you, Mr. Wright,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Bayes. Questions or comments?
I think I said what I wanted to.
Okay, thank you. If there are no questions or comments, this is a roll call vote, starting from my left. Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Bayes,
Aye.
Mr. Bushka,
No,
Ms. Pesky,
No.
Ms. Iannacido,
Yes.
and Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Moving into item 3. Again, a roll call vote to adopt the 2023-2024 Board of Education capital budget at $750,000. Do I have a motion?
second.
Mr. Wright and Mr. Bushka. Questions or comments? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mr. Bayes?
Aye.
Mr. Bushka?
No,
Ms. Pesky?
No.
Ms. Iannacido?
Yes.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Item 4, roll call vote. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the 23-24 city budget at $67,018,105.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And second by Mr. Wright. Roll call vote. Questions or comments on this? Roll call vote. Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mr. Bayes?
Aye.
Mr. Bushka?
no,
Ms. Pesky?
No.
Ms. Iannacido?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Item 5, I'll entertain a motion to set the mill rate at 47.9636.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Bayes. This is also a roll call. Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mr. Bayes,
Aye.
Mr. Bushka,
no,
Ms. Pesky,
No.
Ms. Iannacido,
Yes.
and Mr. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Item 6, also a roll call vote. I'll entertain a motion to set the motor vehicle mill rate at 32.46.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And second by Mr. Wright. Any questions or comments? This being statutorily driven. Roll call, starting with Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mr. Bayes,
Aye.
Mr. Bushka,
aye,
Ms. Pesky,
Aye.
Ms. Iannacido,
Aye.
and Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
There being no further business before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Wright.
Second.
I heard Mr. Wright and Mr. Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
need paper.